Namaste and welcome viewers to another brand new episode of Mirror Prime. I'm Ashish Pareek and over 87,000 people gathered at the Melbourne Cricket Ground today for a blockbuster Boxing Day test match between India and Australia. A young 19-year-old announced himself on the world stage. India's magician Bumrah viewed his magic, but yet again at the end of the day, the focus is all on Virat Kohli, as it always is in Australia. But this time, it is for all the wrong reasons. Kohli and Konstas, Sam Constance, the debutant, had a physical contact, and in some new camera angles that have now emerged, it looks like Virat Kohli walked straight into the young Australian batsman. He then had a verbal spat with the 19-year-old debutant, and Usman Khawaja, the Australian batsman, stepped in before the issue escalated further. While Konstas downplayed the entire incident as emotions in cricket, and he said that Virat Kohli bumped into him accidentally, the ICC has now found Virat Kohli guilty of a physical contact. They've also fined him 20% of his match fee and also added a demerit point to his record. Meanwhile, the Australian media and fans have now started arguing that Virat Kohli has escaped a harsher punishment due to cricket's power dynamics. Konstas, a debut hero with a 50 and a fearless attitude, is now being celebrated as almost a national treasure in Australia. It is almost clear that Virat Kohli did in fact get into the line of Sam Constance. Whether he did that intentionally or not, that's a big debate. Discussing that and a lot more, joining us right now is senior journalist Melinda Farrell. Melinda, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. It's been a fascinating series so far. Lots of action and drama. How do you look at this incident that's happened between Konstas and Kohli? Every time something like this happens, fans usually fiercely back their own. Indian fans would be backing Virat Kohli, Australian fans would be backing Konstas. But this time around, interestingly, a lot of former cricketers and fans here in India also reckon that the entire thing from Virat Kohli was a little bit unnecessary.
Well, I think, often when we look at incidents in cricket generally as people, we tend to look at them through the prism of which team we support or which player we support. But sometimes it's a little bit hard to argue with how things certainly looked to have transpired. And I guess just for a lot of people, a lot of Indians now as well, it seemed to be fairly obvious that it was instigated by Kohli. That was the appearance, primarily because of the way he moved across. I actually thought Sam Constance handled it pretty well. He kind of didn't overreact, but he stood his ground. And then he was pretty gracious when he spoke to the broadcasters later, and he said, he accidentally bumped my shoulder, and what happens on the field stays on the field. And boy, for a 19-year-old, not only can he play a cricket ball from Joseph Hoover pretty well, he can play the game as well. He can handle those questions that might have got someone else into a fair bit of trouble. But it is interesting to see the reactions across the board, with a lot of people saying, it was probably a bit unnecessary. That's where you've also got perhaps the sympathy of people lying with a 19-year-old debutant who's just really impressed everyone as well.
In fact, Melinda, now Sam Constance has almost virtually become a national hero in Australia. He's ramped Bumrah, who's been a menace for Australia. He scored 50 on debut. He's given it back to Virat Kohli. And then he also hasn't dragged this entire issue off the field. Seems like a class act.
Yeah, and look, he's a very mature 19-year-old. That's something that's pretty obvious, I think, for anybody who's watched him. He's brimming with confidence. And part of that confidence comes from being so young. And even he said it himself afterwards, maybe a bit naive as well, but that kind of played in his favor. He always runs out to bat. That's what he always does. It's part of his pre-match routine to run out. But when he ran out in front of more than 80,000 people, and he told Usman Khawaja, I'm facing the first ball. From that moment on, just the confidence and the way he kind of owned the space, I think, probably surprised a few people, but it also definitely impressed, I think, everybody who watched.
And also, Virat Kohli has been fined 20% of his match fee. Strong reactions are also coming in from the Australian media and the public as well about the nature of this fine. Many feel that Virat Kohli has gotten away because of the power dynamics in world cricket. Do you think the stature of a player or his cricket board influence ICC's decisions?
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, the regulations and the penalties should apply equally. They're also, I guess, if you look at the context, nobody wants a big incident like this. I think as far as the Indian team, the Australian team, the officials all around, it's such a huge series. There's so much on the line. It's a big marquee event. And as we all know from history, when things get ugly, when on-field incidents, blow up and they become huge, then that can, cause bad feeling that kind of echo sort of through the years, and it's still talked about today. So I can't say that they have been influenced by that. I just think that everybody would want this not to blow up. But the laws and the regulations should apply. And do you know what I would be doing if I was any other team around the world? If any of their players are involved in a similar kind of incident, I would be pointing to this as a precedent to say, well, look what happened on this occasion. And we've had incidents in the past. Kohli, I should say, Shoaly. I'm thinking of Kohli's shoulder, which I've now renamed Shoaly. But he's been involved in those kinds of incidents before, and he's been, given demerit points. We all know Hisa Rabada and Steve Smith were involved in an incident. So these things happen, and a lot of things are taken into to consideration by officials about where the players were, how the incident played out, eye contact, where they were walking, did they deviate, all those kinds of things. So no two incident is perhaps exactly alike. But I would be pointing to this if I were other teams. If it had been level 2, 4 demerit points, Kohli out of the Sydney Test, I mean, that would have been a huge incident, and probably definitely on the harsh side of penalties. A level 1 demerit point, that's probably on the more lenient side. So, how you see that might again depend on the prism with which you look through a match like this and an incident like this. But I guess what we just don't want to see is it overshadow what was a brilliant day of Test cricket. Sam Constance, amazing debut. Australia seeming to bat better around him because he kind of took the sting out of India's attack. But then Bumrah coming back and taking 3 wickets, and all of a sudden the match kind of evened out a bit more. So hopefully this won't overshadow it. But that's obviously going to be, like everything in this series, it'll be a big story probably for a few days. And then hopefully it all blows over and we see the matches played in really good spirit.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating series so far. And also joining us for the discussion, Vedam Jaishankar, sports journalist, and Joseph Hoover, who's a cricket writer. Gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Of course, time difference here with Melinda Farrell, who's, of course, giving us all those insights about what she's thinking about the game as well. And, of course, I'll come back to you. And, of course, we also have our call-in lines open for the viewers as well. Just the last couple of questions with Melinda. Melinda, before we let you go, Virat Kohli is a massive cricketing figure. Even in Australia, he is, of course, earned the title of king. Local newspapers also call him that. There have been many fierce battles, some very great knocks as well. But do you think this particular tour is in a way denting Virat Kohli's image in Australia? He's short of runs except for that one knock. There's been an altercation with a female journalist as well, and now this.
I mean, I don't know. It might depend on how he performs in the next couple of innings. We all know that at times in the past when he's been under the pump, particularly in Australia and when he's copped a lot of criticism, it's brought out some of his most brilliant batting of his entire career. Now, you've also got, though, now Kohli is obviously in the latter part of his career, and we don't know for how much longer he will be playing Test cricket. Whereas a lot of stuff, remember, happened when he was younger, when he flipped the bird, or, there were lots of things that happened. But even though those things happen, I think Australians kind of respected his fight and his the way of expressing himself, even if it was kind of begrudgingly. Australia loves to have a pantomime villain, but honestly, here in Australia, the whole before a match, all the TV promos and everything, they're all centered on Kohli. They base so much of their advertising on Kohli. It's not often unusual to see Pat Cummins and Virat Kohli in a piece of promotional material, even though obviously Kohli isn't the captain and Pat Cummins is. So he is seen as box office in Australia, and he's promoted and promoted. He is a big name here, which is why I think, everyone wants to see him play in that test match in Sydney in the final one. So look, I think as far as his reputation goes, he's a feisty character and he's passionate. Everyone knows that. And people will either love him or hate him for it. But generally in Australia, there's a bit where people kind of generally really like that about him and his competitive nature. If he makes a couple of big scores, I don't know that his reputation is tarnished. It's very hard to keep that level across an entire career. He's faded a little bit, it's got to be said. But then, one innings from him, and I remember him in Perth, a few years ago when he scored a century, pointing at his bats and then saying, my bat does the talking. So we're about to find out if his bat does the talking, then I think, people will say, well, fair play, he's got himself back into the battle.
Absolutely. Melinda, before we let you go now, final question. Usman Khawaja as well, who's copying a bit of a flag from Australian cricket fans. One, he did not reveal what exactly was the chat between Kohli and Konstas. And also, the other reason is because when this entire altercation happened, he had his arm around Virat Kohli. And a lot of Australian cricket fans now on social media also think that Usman Khawaja should have been siding with Sam Constance and not really being there with Virat Kohli, standing there the way he was standing.
Yeah. Look, I mean, he did put his arm around Kohli, but then he put his arm around Sam Constance, and you can say, well, he should have done one before the other. I don't know. I just think Usman Khawaja is a very calm character, and he's not one who gets fazed by a lot of things. And I just think he stood there and tried to quickly diffuse things and make sure that, hey, look, everything's okay. And he was smiling. He had the chat with Kohli. He had this chat with Konstas, and it's probably a good thing, really, to have a cool and laid back kind of calm character like Usman Khawaja in that situation. The last thing you want is another feisty person to get involved, and he is the senior player. He knows what being out in the middle is like, and so I think that was probably a really good thing for Sam Constance to have that calm presence, but also someone who actually does know Kohli quite well and who knows the Indian players quite well.
Absolutely, Melinda. It was a pleasure speaking to you. We'll have to let you go now, but appreciate your insights on the game and also what's going on. It's going to be a fascinating series to come, and we'll, of course, keep talking to you. But meanwhile, let's go across to our guests now, Vedam Jaishankar and Joseph, who've been waiting for a while now. Vedam and Joseph, firstly, apologies. We, of course, follow the tradition of Atithi Devo Bhava. So we first thought, let's get done with Melinda because of the time reference. But meanwhile, Vedam, let's talk about Virat Kohli now. We talk about how the hosts in India is known for the way we host our guests, but doesn't really, seem so in Australia, because the way fans react to Virat Kohli, we've seen over the years, one of the reasons why they love to hate him as well is because of his aggressive nature. And it's one of the reasons why he's become such a brand as well. But now, with the fact that he's not scoring runs, and secondly, with the fact that there was a 19-year-old who has openly in the past declared his admiration for Virat Kohli, he's come out now, gone right into the young man, shouldered him. Whether that was intentional or not, that's up for debate. But at the end of the day, this is a behavior we're looking at coming from a legend of Indian cricket. How do you rate it? How do you look at it?
Actually, Ashish, I would look only at one thing. When we see action replays of dismissals, they show it from so many angles. Why did they show this only from one angle? That was the end of the over. Virat was walking from slips to the other end slips. A left-hander was batting and then now a right-hander. So obviously he has to go diagonally across. They don't show that angle. They should have shown the angle from behind Virat Kohli. Then you have seen which angle from where he's going. They don't show that angle. They just show it in front and make it look like he's walked right across the pitch. I'm not saying that he might have done it deliberately or he didn't do it deliberately. We don't know. But look, let's also look at this other way. The Australian batsman, 19 years of age and all that, he would have been aware of his surroundings. It's so easy for him also to move out of the way. He didn't do that. He was actually looking for a confrontation. And let's not get into this because the Australians are very good at this game. Let's not forget that when Anil Kumble was captain in Australia, he said one side is not playing cricket. And the laws of the game, I saw the other question that you asked the lady, the laws of the game are very clear on this, especially after a lot of physical contact has been there. There was Sunil Gavaskar who was shoulder charged by Snow. There was another case of Colin Croft running into an umpire, bowling. He's a huge guy, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and a huge West Indian. He ran into the umpire. So after many of these kind of physical instances, the laws of the game brought it in the spirit of the game. The cricket is not a contact sport. It is only after that. Now, even then, it's well defined. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 offenses. Level 1 and level 2 are between players. Now, you asked a question, was it because Kohli was a big guy that he was let off? Let's look at it the other way. Supposing Konstas had provoked this, would you let him go the same way? You would. Why? Because it's the first time instance that he is doing. For Kohli too, this is the first time he's doing. Why should you look at it differently?
But Vedam, on the other hand, now fans are going to come out and say that there was a similar instance between Rabada and Smith as well. Rabada was in fact banned for a match. He had 3 demerit points and he was fined 50% of his match fees. So now fans, of course not Indian fans, but other fans of other nations are now saying that when Rabada does something like this, he is given such a harsh punishment. He's banned for a match. But when Virat Kohli does it, you let him go with just 20% of the match fees. At the end of the day, it's Virat Kohli who's walking away with a laugh, given the sort of penalty that this is.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Because you need to look at it from other angles. You have shown right through every single action that they've shown on social media or on television is only from one angle. Let them show it from the other angle. We'd like to see various angles. If you remember right, there was a catch which Ponting took at slip. You know, the Australian cameras cut it off, you know, the previous series, as soon as he grasped the ball. But later it showed he was actually grounding the ball.
But again, Vedam, I'm not really sure what sort of a difference the other angles would have made because it is very clear from the one angle that we saw. But meanwhile, let's also get in Joseph here. Joseph's been listening to us. Joseph, now Virat Kohli is known for his aggression. We've gotten used to it for the past many, many years now. How much of this do you think is his natural aggression and how much do you think it's because of the pressure that he's under? He's just not the same Virat Kohli of the past that had visited Australia, dominated Australia. He's under a lot of pressure and then something like this happens. How much do you think it's because of the pressure that he's under?
I mean, he's been around for such a long time. He's been playing international cricket for almost 15 years now. So to talk about saying that he's under pressure, I wouldn't agree with that because it is obvious that there was an intent. I would disagree with Vedam because he's saying from different angles. But from what we saw, I mean, I'm a photographer. I also shoot. So I know the angles. So what is up? There was a bit of intent in that. That could have been avoided, especially at a time when he's going to retire soon. I mean, he's already said he's going to settle down in London. He said, if I go, I'm not going to see him for a couple of years. With that mindset, he should have been more calmer. Yes, a younger Virat Kohli could do this. He could get away. But at the fag end of his career, to go into, get into such a controversy is unnecessary. You should have been more mature. I mean, after all, that's a youngster who's playing there, who's looked up to him as an icon. And you need to at least, encourage those guys saying, well done, mate, get on with the game. But to go and shoulder him, which I feel was very unfair, and Virat could have definitely avoided it. I mean, like a lot of times we see that when he's seen in such aggressive postures, It influences a lot of youngsters. These are all our icons. These are all our legends. People follow them. Millions of people follow them. So, way I would say is, you should be all the more careful, all the more mature to stop this. Oh, my phone went for a 6.
Absolutely. Now, Vedam, clearly you have Joseph there saying that he knows his angles, he knows what difference the other angles would have made, or rather what difference they wouldn't have made. So Joseph is very clear with his point there. But also, Vedam, the other thing that we need to talk about is the ICC's action here, because now the message that is being sent out is that if you are from the Indian cricket team, if you belong to a board that is as powerful as the BCCI, you may walk straight into an opposition player, even though cricket is strictly not a contact sport. You can walk straight into an opposition player, and the maximum punishment that you'll get is just 20% match fee. Do you think this is the right message being sent across by the ICC as well?
Well, you're talking like an Australian, not like an Indian. But let's look at evidence. Let's go on evidence. What does the law say?
Now, Vedam, I'm talking like a cricket fan. I am looking at it like a cricket fan. Like, I could defend Virat Kohli acting like a Indian fan, but the problem is a behavior that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, whether it be an Indian or an Australian or any other team. I mean, we are all cricket lovers here before supporting any team. So,
Ashish, there is a 20% fine on him, penalty. Okay, if he could have got away with it, there wouldn't have been a 20% fine on him. He would have been let go scot-free. It's a first-time offense. And let's not forget one thing. The law is blind. Justice is supposed to be blind, irrespective of whether you're 19 years old.
Vedam, technically looking, it's not the first time. Everybody remembers how Virat Kohli behaved with Tim Payne in the past as well. The way he was trying to intimidate him. Everyone's seen how he behaved with other players also in the past, especially in Australia. So Virat Kohli is someone who's been doing this for a long time now. Now, the thing is, earlier he was scoring runs. So it was being celebrated as well, an aggressive cricketer who has this edge to him, but now he's not scoring runs and he's then behaving like this. So it is a different scenario right
wrong,
now.
Ashish. Let me tell you, you're wrong. Because the Tim Payne incident that you talked, first, Tim Payne crashed against him, one. Second part of it was before this spirit of cricket law was brought in. It is only after a lot of these physical instances, that's exactly what I said, whether it was with Sunil Gavaskar and John Snow or Colin Croft or a whole lot of others. It was only after that this rule was brought, the spirit of cricket. And it's clearly laid out, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. It's level 3 and level 4 if you have physical contact either with the umpire or with the match referee. And even here, there are a lot of punishments. It can be a 1 test ban or 2 ODIs. In the first instance, level 2 can even call for 6 test ban. So they are going according to the rules. It's not somebody wanting to work on whims and fancies and say, okay, I don't like this guy. He's too aggressive for my liking. So let me go and ban him. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be straightforward. Unless the ICC is straightforward, and they have been, because 20% is still a lot of fine. Now, what happens is, if he becomes a repeat offender, then automatically will get into level 2, which will call for a 6-match ban. So I think they've been right. They should not look at who the player is. If it is a first-time offense, yes, treat it as a first-time offense. But if he's a repeat serial offender, then go after him. That's the law, and they're playing according to the rule. It's not our whims and fancies which runs the show.
All right. Joseph, how do you look at this now? Because clearly Vedam has his, opinion on this very sorted. He's, of course, making his own points. But the thing here is, now I've heard in the past people say that never meet your heroes. And I think I saw it for the first time what it means. Sam Constance, I saw a lot of his videos of him hailing Virat Kohli, talking about how he's that player that he looks forward to. In fact, in one of the interviews, Sam Constance even chose Virat Kohli over Steve Smith, who was then the Australian captain. And then today, on Sam Constance's test debut, when he's stunned the entire world, when he's played one of the finest knocks that you've seen from an Australian opener against Bumrah, this happens between Virat Kohli and Sam Constance. Now, imagine the impression of Virat Kohli that's changed in Sam Constance's mind.
No, whether it is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, doesn't matter. What Virat did could have been avoided. He should have been more mature. The point here is, you're a senior cricketer. You've been around for such a long time. You have been the captain of the Indian team. You're one of the top-notch cricketers in the world. And you need to set the example for the rest of the world. And when you show this kind of aggression, it reflects. I mean, it's not that it's new that Virat does what he does. But here the point is, this could have been avoided. It was needless. I mean, here you have a youngster batting, you appreciate him, or you just ignore him and just allow him to make his mistakes. Well, you are not been performing, but when you get back into nick like how Sachin did in 2003, 2004, when he got the big double 100, 242 not out, we should understand he could also do that. So he should have been calmer and said, okay, let my time go by, bide my time, and I'll come back.
In fact, Joseph, I saw a couple of reports which said that Virat Kohli told Mohammad Siraj particularly not to smile while having a conversation with Australians.
Yeah, that's very unfair. I mean, I feel we are just tilting. I mean, we need to be more mature. We are just playing cricket. We are not fighting here. We are playing a game. One win, someone wins, someone lose. There'll be times when you're under a lot of pressure. There'll be times when you're on a high. So all this happens as part of the game. But I was very disappointed. I talk from the cricket perspective. I don't worry about who's the star, who's what. We don't worry about much about that. From a cricket perspective, way I look at it is he could have avoided it. I mean, this is set a bad example. I mean, there are millions who follow Virat and who idolize him. And what will the youngsters learn from them? So Virat has to understand, yes, fantastic. He's a great cricketer. He's done fantastically well. All that is fine, but he could avoid this. He should have avoided this. And if somebody is criticizing him, well, he should take it and say, okay, well, it's my mistake. I've done that. Whether it's level 1, level 2, doesn't matter. What he did
absolutely, Joseph.
And what we see
in fact,
is what we feel.
A very valid point that you made there. Let's keep aside the fact that whether this was a level 1, level 2, level 3 offense, or let's even keep aside the fact whether Virat Kohli is naturally aggressive or not. Whether Virat Kohli wants to see this sort of a clip at the end of his career, him walking straight into a 19-year-old trying to intimidate him, well, that's a call that Virat Kohli has to take. And of course, the ICC has already handed him the punishment that they think he deserves. On that note, Vedam and Joseph, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast for Mirror Now here. We're, of course, we'll keep talking a lot about cricket and all things Border Gavaskar Trophy as long as the tour continues. But meanwhile, that's a wrap on this edition of Mirror Prime. Lots more lined up on the other side. Stay tuned.